Penguin Random House Audio presents The Data Detective. 10 Easy Rules to Make Sense of Statistics. Written and read by Tim Harford.
To teachers everywhere, and my teachers in particular, in fond memory of Peter Sinclair. Introduction. How to lie with statistics. The truly genuine problem does not consist of proving something false, but in proving that the authentic object is authentic. Umberto Eco. You know the old story about storks delivering babies? It's true. I can prove it with statistics. Take a look at the estimated population of storks in each country, and then at the number of babies born each year. Across Europe, there's a remarkably strong relationship. More storks, more babies. Fewer storks, fewer babies. The pattern is easily strong enough to pass a traditional hurdle for publication in an academic journal. In fact, a scientific paper has been published with the title Storks Deliver Babies, P equals 0.008. Without getting too technical, all those zeros tell us that this is not a coincidence. Perhaps you've already guessed the trick. Large European countries, such as Germany, Poland, and Turkey, are home to many babies and many storks. Small countries, such as Albania and Denmark, have few babies and few storks. While there's a clear pattern in the data, that pattern does not mean that storks cause babies to appear. You can prove anything with statistics, it seems, even that storks deliver babies. You'd certainly have got that impression from reading How to Lie with Statistics. Published in 1954 by a little-known American freelance journalist named Darrell Huff, this wisecracking, cynical little book immediately received a rave review from the New York Times and went on to become perhaps the most popular book on statistics ever published, selling well over 1 million copies. The book deserves the popularity and the praise. It's a marvel of statistical communication. It also made Darrell Huff a nerd legend. Ben Goldacre, an epidemiologist and best-selling author of Bad Science, has written admiringly of how the Huff had written a ripper. The American writer Charles Whelan describes his book Naked Statistics as an homage to Huff's classic. The respected journal Statistical Science organized a Huff retrospective 50 years after its publication. I used to feel the same way. As a teenager, I loved reading How to Lie with Statistics. Bright, sharp, and illustrated throughout with playful cartoons, the book gave me a peek behind the curtain of statistical manipulation, showing me how the swindling was done so that I would not be fooled again. Huff is full of examples. He begins by pondering how much money Yale graduates make. According to a 1950 survey, the class of 1924 had an average income of close to $500,000 a year in today's terms. That is just plausible enough to believe. This is Yale, after all, but $500,000 a year is a lot of money. Is that really the average? No. Huff explains that this improbably salubrious figure comes from self-reported data, which means we can expect people to exaggerate their income for the sake of vanity. Furthermore, the survey is only of people who bothered to respond, and only those alumni that Yale could find. And who are easily found? The rich and famous. Who are the little lost sheep down in the Yale rolls as address unknown? Asks Huff. Yale will keep track of the millionaire alumni, but some of the also-ran graduates might easily have slipped through the net. All this means that the survey will present a grossly inflated view. Huff briskly moves on through a vast range of statistical crimes, from toothpaste advertisements based on cherry-picked research to maps that change their meaning depending on how you colour them in. As Huff wrote, "The crooks already know these tricks. Honest men must learn them in self-defence." If you read How to Lie with Statistics, you will come away more sceptical about the ways numbers can deceive you. It's a clever and instructive book. But I've spent more than a decade trying to communicate statistical ideas and fact-check numerical claims, and over the years I've become more and more uneasy about How to Lie with Statistics and what that little book represents. What does it say about statistics and about us, that the most successful book on the subject is, from cover to cover, a warning about misinformation? Darrell Huff published How to Lie with Statistics in 1954. But something else happened that very same year. Two British researchers, Richard Doll and Austin Bradford Hill, produced one of the first convincing studies to demonstrate that smoking cigarettes caused lung cancer. Doll and Hill could not have figured this out without statistics. Lung cancer rates had increased sixfold in the UK in just 15 years. By 1950, the UK had the highest in the world, and deaths from lung cancer exceeded deaths from tuberculosis for the first time. Even to realise that this was happening required a statistical perspective. No single doctor would have formed more than an anecdotal impression. As for showing that cigarettes were to blame, again, statistics were essential. A lot of people thought that motor cars were the cause of the rise in lung cancer. That made perfect sense. In the first half of the 20th century, motor cars became commonplace, with their exhaust fumes and the strangely compelling vapour from the tar in new roads. Lung cancer increased at the same time. Figuring out the truth, that it was cigarettes rather than cars that caused lung cancer, required more than simply looking around. It required researchers to start counting and comparing with care. More concisely, it required statistics. The cigarette hypothesis was viewed with scepticism by many, although it was not entirely new. For example, there had been a big research effort in Nazi Germany to produce evidence that cigarettes were dangerous. Adolf Hitler despised smoking. The Führer was no doubt pleased when German doctors discovered that cigarettes caused cancer. For obvious reasons, though, hated by Nazis was no impediment to the popularity of tobacco. So Doll and Hill decided to conduct their own statistical investigations. Richard Doll was a handsome, quiet, and unfailingly polite young man. He had returned from the Second World War with a head full of ideas about how statistics could revolutionize medicine. His mentor, Austin Bradford Hill, had been a pilot in the First World War, before nearly dying of tuberculosis. Hill was a charismatic man, had a sharp wit, and was said to be the finest medical statistician of the 20th century. Their work together as data detectives was to prove life-saving. The pair's first smoking and cancer study began on New Year's Day, 1948. It was centred around 20 hospitals in northwest London, and Richard Doll was in charge. Every time a patient arrived in hospital with cancer, nurses would, at random, find someone else in the same hospital, of the same sex, and about the same age. Both the cancer patients and their counterparts would be quizzed in depth about where they lived and worked, their lifestyle and diet, and their history of smoking. Week after week, month after month, the results trickled in. In October 1949, less than 2 years after the trial began, Doll stopped smoking. He was 37 and had been a smoker his entire adult life. He and Hill had discovered that heavy smoking of cigarettes didn't just double the risk of lung cancer, or triple the risk, or even quadruple the risk. It made you 16 times more likely to get lung cancer. Hill and Doll published their results in September 1950 and promptly embarked on a bigger, longer-term and more ambitious trial. Hill wrote to every doctor in...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?